So good afternoon, Irene. Nice to see you again on the second day of your presence in Davos. I hope you've been having a good, interesting set of discussions today. I wanted to catch up on where we left off yesterday about trust and data markets and how we drive data exchange at an international level.
Hi, Ivan. Yes, you can see I've got a very nice background of quotes, only because this is probably the only quiet corner I can find. But I've got a glass of wine. It's been a long day. I still have a few more meetings to go, but it's always nice to chat with you.
Good sign that things are active in Davos. Okay. Yesterday, we discussed a little bit the notion that in data markets, or rather that we need trust between participants in data markets, and that trust needs to be something that's relatively visible when participants decide to use or share data. I think today you said that you were running a session in Davos about the broader evolution of tech platforms and AI. Maybe you could give us a quick synopsis of some of the topics that you raised with the participants at Davos.
Yeah, well, I was on a panel and I spoke mostly, at least from my perspective, on markets and market design. Obviously, two things will always come up. Number one, trust. Number two, AI. So let me just take each one of them in turn. In my world, in my vocabulary, the word is not trust. The word in the vocabulary of market design, the word is safety. Do participants feel safe to transact? Of course, if you trust someone, you would feel safe. But from a market design perspective, safety is a core component, one of the three main principles of how a market can form. If you do not provide safety, markets cannot form. However, I did mention that trust and safety here isn't binary. You don't suddenly feel safe or not feel safe. You feel safe enough for a particular type of transaction. And I use the example of if I buy chewing gum, the transaction takes about 30 seconds. I give the guy 50 cents and he gives me chewing gum. I trust that when I give him 50 cents, he will give me the chewing gum back in about less than a minute. I don't trust him with my third born child, but I trust him that he will give me the chewing gum in 30 seconds. So I think the data markets will be the same. I don't trust that you will take care of my data, but I trust to give you a business card. And if we give you a business card, it's essentially my name, my mobile, my email. So there is some nuances to the way we trust people and give information, and when it moves and how to what extent it gets transferred into a digital realm, right? So the other example I'll give is when I walk into a shop, I am not private at all. You can see my face. You can see my body. You can see my shape. You can see my size. You are a shopkeeper. You see my size and you say, you know what? This will suit you perfectly. You did this online and I'm anonymous. And you say, this will fit you perfectly. You'd be so creeped out. Like, how would you know what my size is? So the way we think about markets and its transference, both the transference of a transaction and transference of trust, is to understand what the value of that transaction is for both parties and to what extent it is safe to do so for that price, for that transaction value, and will it settle? Will it close? Will that transaction culminate?
So that's an interesting concept. I mean, let's start with that. You know, I think we intuitively understand that there are different circumstances around transactions of economics. In some areas, I need to have high safety. In other areas, I might be comfortable with low safety and security because there's less at stake, and it also might influence the way I choose where I choose to meet. So you're sitting there now in Davos, presumably from experience in similar venues, you feel safe, I'm guessing, discussing with a lot of the people you meet there, even if you've never met them before, because they've been vetted and invited to this safe place, literally surrounded by the Swiss army, I think. But how does that then transpose to the discussion you're having about sharing data in digital marketplaces where, to your point, we cannot, or the whole purpose is we want to avoid having to interact physically in the same place?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we are seeing in a lot of the markets for data right now is market failure. A market is failing is because the transaction you are expected to get into is asking too much. You do not need me to sign up to an entire app and give away everything just to get that one piece of value. And this is what consumers are basically pushing back on, that you are asking too much for the value that you're given. It takes signing up for a Wi-Fi in an airport. You're asking for my email to get Wi-Fi connection for half an hour. That is not because I don't trust, because you are asking too much. The market fails when I don't feel safe and you are asking too much. The value to me is not that high that I'll give you my email, or it may be high enough because I really need to get online that I will give you my email. So in a similar way, I think where we start to see failure of markets for trusting data is exactly the nature of the exchange. If I'm asking only for that little bit and in 2 minutes it will disappear and I will never keep it, I don't think that's a problem. You can argue that potentially he still doesn't trust because he doesn't know whether you keep your word. But there you go. This is the time where that safety is not about trusting. It's about the environment of safety that you created. Remember, an environment of safety to transact isn't just down to two parties. It's about the environment itself. Like you say, if I'm in Davos, I may not trust him. He may not trust me, but I will give him things. He will give me things because I'm in the Davos situation. So that was a third party that brokered an environment and a context. And I think when you design markets, that environment and what exactly is being done or being exchanged becomes very critical. Oh, you're muted, Irene.
We talk a lot about platforms today. Again, they keep hitting the news for various reasons. I don't know whether we've reached in peak, what we might call peak platform, but what you've just described in the situation, the analogy of the situation in Davos, is that not why we precisely go to some of the online merchants, some of the online platforms, because either we implicitly trust them or because we know, such as in the App Store, they've already vetted the apps to a certain extent so that we can trust them? Is that the case? And if so, why do you say markets are failing then?
So markets are currently happening, particularly for data, on the platform where the data is being generated. So if you generated data on Amazon, you trust Amazon, you generated the data, Amazon brokers to trust. If you're doing the same with Google. But these are our data, energy data, hospitality, health, bank. But once you take it out of context, you take it away. For example, I just want to take my hospital data out and I just verify that I'm allergic to nuts to the airline. You're now in a very different environment. The brokering of the context to which I can trust you with that piece of information that was generated in one place and now being transacted in the place is the role of the intermediaries. You are now out of platform.
So you're bringing up the notion that we need to separate trust from the platforms through which it is initially produced and make that trust and the role that is provided to around it to be either transportable or fungible or perhaps provided by another party who's not integrated with or part of that platform. Is that?
Exactly. It's the same with national ID, for example. National ID is digitized. There's an API, it takes it out. National ID was created completely out of context. It was your registration, your nationality. It wasn't even created on the platform. It was created by the government. And one of the problems or one of the challenges of why that particular asset could fail is because it doesn't have a platform to which you could you could transport the trust or the context out of. Now you've got to find, and the role of intermediary is to find context in which you can broker a safe transaction for the national IDs. And that is the key issue for a lot of countries' national ID, the distribution. How are you distributing it? And when and how is it safe for the way it is distributed?
But there, I mean, you raised the interesting point in my mind, two issues around the role of government. We have, on the one hand, governments that are at least making very vocal statements about their intention, their ambition to develop markets in data. And on the other hand, they are focusing their attention on trying to make access to some of the data that they themselves either create or over which they have the power to decide whether it's true or false, like our identities. Are those two roles, how do those two roles fit together in your mind as government? And what's missing, if anything, to help this development come forward?
Again, we come back down to the market, right? On the demand side, there may be the use for the information. And on the supply side, they may be a supplier of that data. How the market then be able to transact is either the intermediary or the platform or wherever that transaction is. The issue, of course, is we're talking about hundreds and thousands of apps, none of which are saying we have a problem with login, we have a problem with identity. None of them are saying that. So if you're thinking, then you are starting to look for, we need a use case. And the problem when you start thinking that way is that you start to go down a vertical way of transporting this data rather than horizontal. So at today's session, I talk about two interesting concepts. I talk about the masculine view, and I'm not talking about gender. I'm just talking about a masculine view of data, which is very vertical. It serves its purpose. It's generated for a purpose. It does its job. And a feministic view of data, which is about connections and it's about how it flows between. And I think we have lived in a world that there are many, many verticals, and there's not enough understanding of the horizontalization of such data and where and when such data could be used in context to be transacted. And so I think this is a job for an intermediary, of which, of course, Dataswyft is one of them. And I can only speak to Dataswyft as the intermediary. We spent a long time looking at what piece of asset taken out of the contract to make it completely safe to be able to transact. Like the chewing gum, we are looking for the chewing gum, of which people would be able to easily, from an experience point of view, don't even think about it because it creates value, we are willing to transact. And we found that proofs, because proofs are the biggest pain point. But then again, proofs are one type of asset. As you create habit and people trust that this is being used, you can then layer on top of it other pieces of information. But the danger, I think, for governments working closely with tech platforms is that you forget there is an entire middle ground called the market. And the danger of government who prize regulation and tech who prize a rigidity of a platform, a very masculine view of a platform, is that the whole market view and how to use markets to create that value, how to horizontalize that market is then lost.
So three things then maybe. Firstly, I like this juxtaposition of the horizontal versus the vertical. I think we've seen that play out in many areas of market evolution, where often integrated stacks start to, once they become mature, spread out. it reminds me a lot of John Kay's book on progress and how it's always often oblique, so that we take zigzags towards progress. And in that context, you kind of imply that governments are not doing the right thing, but what is it then? I mean, you seem to agree with the principle that we need to get away from the centralization around platforms. That maybe customer confidence is such that we have reached platform peak. And you seem to be saying, though, but where we need to start to be pragmatic is to work on marketplaces where actually the level of safety we need is very low, which then implies that actually governments don't need to do anything. Is that the right conclusion, or is there something governments nevertheless can be doing?
I think governments definitely have a role, just like tech platforms have a role. What I would urge them to understand is that the middle ground of which you can keep markets free, and of course, when you want to keep markets free, our principle is you must democratize data. You must allow the democratization to happen so that new services for the same data can be used. And exactly to your point, the zigzag is going sailing. There's a prevailing wind. You always zigzag because otherwise you're going to go nowhere. So you zig this way and then you zag that way, but you progress along the way till you then can be able to go perhaps a little bit more in a straight line. And again, the zigzag is tech. Remember, tech platforms. If you look at a behavior, just think about data as behavior. And my favorite mantra is data is behavior. So of course, if you keep your data democratized and free for markets, you're keeping your behaviors free, right? So if you think about then as data, the flow to get from A to B from a tech platform point of view is one way, because there's a wire. There's a wire. So if I want to get from point A to point B without a wire, there's a million ways I can do A to B. I can zigzag, I can walk straight. But the moment you have a tech solution, there is only one way. So in order to keep the million ways you can get from A to B, you've got to make sure you democratize the asset, and then you incentivize the market to build different kinds of intermediate safety environments for transacting pieces of data, whether it's ID, whether it's health or whatever it is. What I'm just saying is there is a middle way between tech platform and government, and that is the understanding of how markets function. And governments and tech has to have a better understanding of that middle way.
So one last question then, and I'd like to ask about tomorrow's agenda. If, practically speaking, I have lots of data already on one of these big platforms, and I want to reuse it, how do I do that? Or what are going to be the market levers or incentives to get market platforms to make it fungible? Or should I be thinking about starting with totally new data that I've never even put onto my platform?
Well, I can only tell you how Dataswyft does it, right? Dataswyft allows you to acquire your data, and it becomes a data profile. So your data profile is never shared. You bring your Fitbit in, you can bring your Facebook in, you can bring your hospital in, they're all data profiles. However, you can use the data profile that's currently in your wallet, in your hat, in your microserver, in your database, owned by you, and apply it to the demand side artifact, the pieces of data that truly have value in the market. Above 21 age, verified CV, a loan application form, or whatever it is that you want to be able to apply pieces of your data to. Now, Dataswyft chooses to do that, and of course, this is not for everybody. This is our way of doing it. Chooses to do that because the separation of supply side from the demand side is necessary to understand that the supply side data has a different market dynamic. It might be useful for insights, for example, maybe something for me to understand about myself. It's a different market. The demand side data, which is where we are focusing on is all about merchant. So Dataswyft runs a network, and a merchant network is very important for us. The many different merchants that will make a badge, create a badge, and that lets you then take pieces of your data profile and transact it in the market. Now we price the different badges because that's how our network works. But we do it because fundamentally to a market design, it creates safety. You know that you're not going to leak data when you see a badge, that's the only thing you're transacting on and nothing else. We create the ability for congestion not to happen, because if you let supply side flow straight into the demand side, you'll get congestion. So, and then we allow for thickness to happen, which is the third principle of market design, which is that you've got a group of people who genuinely want this piece of data and they want to transact on it if the people have it. You know? So on the basis of market design principles, we constructed our intermediary service that way in our data wallet. Now, there could be many different other models that other different intermediaries might choose to do based on the same market design principles, but that's kind of how we do it. I can only talk to that one.
Okay, so let's leave it there. I know two other terms that maybe some of the audience will want to better understand. You refer to merchants and you refer to badges. And in the context of interoperability of markets, you alluded to the idea that there will be lots of data intermediaries out there, hopefully in future. That's what a market is about. Maybe we can pick up on those two terms tomorrow. Maybe you could just briefly tell us what's on the agenda tomorrow.
Oh gosh. So tomorrow I won't be in Davos. I'm down in Zurich for a very nice lunch. And a few other meetings, all stem from, of course, some of the Davos meetings. But I think where we are seeing a lot of interest and understanding in whom we've been speaking to is really about the value side. It's really about the economic impact. I like to tell the story about, how 1901 your employer used to pay your wages because you didn't have a bank account, and you needed the employer to pay your bills for you. They will pay your grocery bills, they'll pay everybody. This is the situation we have with data today. You give permission for someone to transfer your data for you. And that then turned into a bank being the trusted agent, and you give them a check, which is an instruction to say pay him. And then finally today you have agency today, a payment wallet, a debit card, where you make the choice of who you want to pay. And of course that created that $2.3 trillion payment economy. I use that as a way to explain the economic impact and the multiplier for democratizing and liberalizing some of the platform data, which is not against the platforms. In fact, they'll probably be rewarded for it when it's being used this way. And that's how our model works as well, that you get rewarded if it's being used downstream. But I think governments are really, really key, particularly governments searching for growth. And we see many governments really searching for growth, for economic impact. And so most of the conversations are all demand-side conversations. The merchant network, the people who are transacting, which ones, how, and can we do more? It's a lot around that. The supply side, I think we kind of know there's a lot.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Irene. That leaves me with yet another topic to follow up on tomorrow when we reconnect when you're in Zurich. So thank you very much.
Thank you.